5 Live Drive, in depth.
With Anna Foster and Tony Livesey.
Now, being able to cast your vote in an election is a cornerstone of freedom and democracy, but disability charities have told Drive that it's a right denied to some people with impaired eyesight or learning disabilities.
Mencap and the RNIB said there's a whole range of reasons why people who want to vote might not actually be able to do it. Things like forms that are too hard to fill out, all the way through to people not being able to allowed to take a friend in to help them.
We're going to consider this more then after news and sport. If you've had similar problems, let us know at BBC 5 Live or on 85058.
On digital, online, smartphone and tablet. This is BBC 5 Live.
More than 1 million people in the UK are diagnosed with a learning disability or autism, but voting levels amongst this group are extremely low. That's according to Dimensions, an organisation which encourages people in these categories to vote.
And the Royal National Institute of Blind People says there are 350,000 people in the UK who are registered blind or partially sighted. But it says that many of them continue to face really unacceptable barriers to exercising their democratic right to vote in secret. And Mencap, the learning disability charity, says people they speak to also have problems even accessing the booth to get in and vote. Rob Holland from the charity says more needs to be done by all the political parties.
We did some research that said 64% didn't vote back in the local elections in 2014, and that's a hugely worrying figure. As I say, there were over 1 million voters. So one of those reasons is that the political parties aren't reaching out to people with learning disabilities and involving them in the national debate, and that's why it's critical that they produce easy-read manifestos. So that's jargon-free text with images, so that people with a learning disability can read those.
So if that's you, if you've got a learning disability, if you're blind or partially sighted, let us know how things have worked for you, really, when you've gone to try and vote. Maybe people have gone out of their way to help you, or maybe it's been a really difficult and awkward experience that's almost put you off doing what you should be allowed to do. 85058 on the text. You can find us as well on social media at BBC 5 Live. I'm going to talk about this with Jordan Smith. Jordan, hi.
Hi, Anna.
You've got a mild learning disability, but you've struggled in the past to actually go and vote, haven't you?
I have, particularly in 2005 when I was first eligible to vote. It was quite a traumatic experience where it was quite busy, quite noisy, and the person that I had to help me to vote wasn't allowed to come into the booth with me to help me cast my vote. And in the end, it got a bit too much, and we had to walk away and not be able to vote.
Yeah. Laura Locke's with us as well. Laura, hi.
Hi.
You're a training manager with the Association of Electoral Administrators, but you've been a deputy returning officer as well. What Jordan describes there, are you allowed to have somebody in the booth to help you? Is that the way things should work if they're being done properly?
Yes, you certainly are. You can either take a companion in with you, or the staff in the polling station, so the presiding officer, they will go in and help you. There's a form that would need to be filled in just to ensure that people aren't doing it for any fraudulent reasons or anything, but it's simply asking for a record of who's assisting you. But there would be no problem with you taking a companion into the polling booth.
Yeah, so it sounds in Jordan's situation there that things weren't done properly, and it's a real shame when he describes how it almost put him off.
Yeah, I would say things have changed. Certainly the Electoral Administration Act of 2006 did abolish any reference to the common law regarding the legal incapacity to vote by a person's mental state. So now anyone that wants to go along to vote at the polling station can go along to vote, and if they can't take anyone with them, they certainly will be able to be helped by the people who work in the polling station on the day.
Yeah, Hugh Hoodie's with us as well, the Accessibility Policy Manager for the RNIB. Hello, Hugh.
Hi there.
And Stephen Anderson's in our studio in Westminster, along with his guide dog Barney. Stephen and Barney, hello.
Good evening from both of us.
And just talk us through, Stephen, the way it works for you, because we just think about going to vote. You go to the polling station, you go in the booth, you tick your box, you put a cross in the box, obviously, don't you? You put it in the box at the end, in the ballot box. I mean, for you, what kind of difficulties do you face in something which so many people take for granted?
Well, if I give you sort of a scope of what I have to go through or that's probably the wrong phrase, but what I have to manage from start to finish. You have to contact the local elections office to request a tactile overlay, which goes over the top of the, in inverted commas, normal ballot paper to assist in a visually impaired person helping. It has braille and it has markers so that you, in theory, know which candidate you're voting for.
Why do you say in theory? Because you rely on somebody else to put it on there for you.
Well, this is the problem.
Yeah.
The tactile overlays half the time don't fit. Sometimes they are made to fit in line with the table or the grid that is on the ballot paper, which is all well and good if you can see it. Also, 90% of people make their vote based on who the candidate is or who the political party is. The tactile overlay does not actually tell you what candidates are which, and if you want to know that information, you either have to get hold of a large print version if you've got enough sight to see it, or you have to ask someone to read out the candidates' names, political parties, and so on. In a sense, getting rid of the idea that your vote is secret.
I see what you mean. So they're not specific to the constituency. They're just kind of standard models. So you need somebody to actually give you that input to be able to do it.
They are, in theory, linked to the constituency. So if you've got 13 candidates, your tactile marker will have 13 points on it.
But it won't have 13 names.
No, it will just have in braille. It will have the number sign and then the letter. So number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. So then you have to go, excuse me, what's number 4? What's number 5? And I'm a political junkie. People know most of the time how I vote, but I should be able to have the discretion of keeping that anonymous if I so wish.
Yeah, does that frustrate you that you need to let somebody in that way to something which is a very private and personal decision to all of us?
I think you touch on something there, which I think my personal experience will be quite useful to explain in a bit more detail. For the EU referendum, once I got to my local civic centre, and for the purposes of this, I'm going to keep the town a secret. You'll see why in a second. First thing that happened, one of the returning officer came out and said, "Oh, I don't like dogs." So it's thank you for being
that was the welcome, was it?
Yes. It shouldn't be expected, but you do come to expect it, even though we're in 2017. They give you a time and a place that isn't necessarily convenient. You sort of have to. Well, in my case, I had to go when I was told, not on the day, not at a set time when they wanted me to. And when I finally came to actually mark the ballot paper, the tactile marker was slightly out of shape. So if I'd put a mark where I wanted to put a mark, then I would have put a mark in between two options, and my vote would have been disqualified. And then when the person who was with me noticed how I was voting, it raised a comment. Really, your vote? I mean,
oh, really? Yeah.
So the Electoral Commission have said that everyone every voter has the right to vote independently and in secret. And I don't really think somebody looking over your shoulder and essentially sneering at how you vote is really meeting that.
No, I mean, Hugh, to hear that, I mean, it's just a basic question of dignity, really, isn't it? You know, you should be able, as Stephen says, to have the same right as everybody else and cast your vote in secret.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've been campaigning on accessible voting for over 10 years. Blind and partially sighted people from up and down the country contact us to say, we've had this problem or that problem, and what can you do to help? We've been raising the issues of tactile templates not fitting, staff not knowing what to do with them. I'm visually impaired myself, and I tried to vote last year, and the template actually tore the ballot paper in half when we took it off. And there's problems like this everywhere, but there's also sort of flickers of hope, because we also get reports from people who say that actually the staff were really helpful and the template did work.
Yeah, there's a couple of people asking about alternatives. I mean, people are asking about postal votes, which obviously, again, would need to be in braille or technology online. Ed in London suggests, I mean, obviously that doesn't happen at the moment. But are there things, Hugh, that would help?
I think the current system could work much better than it does if the procedures are followed. The template, if properly designed, and I don't know about the speaker just now, but the couple of templates I've used in the last few years have just felt very strange. I haven't really been able to use them properly, and the referendum one didn't seem to fit the ballot paper, and that meant I had to ask somebody, have I put my mark in the right place? And so lost my secrecy. Now, things like that shouldn't be happening. The template should be fitting. The regulations of the Representation of the People's Act 1983 clearly says that a blind voter must be able to vote independently, and the template really has to be able to facilitate that.
Can I second everything that you've just said?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Laura, before we hear from the Electoral Commission, Laura Locke, I mean, have you ever been in a position as a deputy returning officer where you know that things haven't been quite right? You know, you've been in that situation where you maybe wanted to help somebody, but you didn't have the tools at your disposal.
Certainly, anecdotally, we've heard of people where their staff in the polling stations, so like the example that was just given, aren't offering the right support for people, making the comment about bringing a guide dog in and things like that. I would say the tactile voting devices, the depth of the ballot paper is prescribed by law, and the tactile voting devices are the same depth, so there's no reason they shouldn't line up. Certainly, you do need to know which candidate represents which number on the tactile voting device, but the presiding officer should be able to tell you that and then leave you to cast the vote independently. Certainly, we ensure that all of the staff are trained to make sure they know how to attach the voting device, and it has got clear instructions on the packaging. But if you do experience any problem in the polling station, then report it to the returning officer at your local council, because there's obviously an issue with that particular member of staff in the station.
The only thing is, Laura, I see the point you're making, but after the event, you've lost. If something's gone wrong, your democratic right to vote has gone, hasn't it?
Well, if you were to mark it in the wrong place, then yes, and that obviously is an issue, and possibly that's where people might be better off to consider a postal vote so that they can vote in their own home, and ask for a tactile voting device to be provided to them at their home.
Yeah, let's just have a quick listen to it. This is Elsa Irvin from the Electoral Commission. They are, of course, the independent body that oversees elections in the UK.
What we have done is we provide guidance to returning officers at local authorities, who are the ones with responsibility for running the elections, to help them to set up polling stations and to administer the voting process in a way that means that people can access it easily. So things like, for example, making sure that they set up the polling stations so that everybody can get in and everyone can see all the notices and things are positioned well, and training of polling station staff. We've also been working closely with a number of disability charities to try to work with them to make sure that we can promote information and make it available for people in a way that's accessible to them. The voting process in general is tightly prescribed as for where we are now. And in terms of looking ahead, I think there are improvements that can be made and things that can be revised and looked at differently. And that's something that we as an organisation and others across the electoral community are keen to continue to look at and to see what improvements can be made to the system. So any of these things would require legislative change as well as investigation. So I think there's a role for a number of different people to play, from the government right through to the Commission and to returning officers and to all sorts of other organisations, to look at how the system can be improved.
That's Elsa Irvin from the Electoral Commission.
Jack's just been on Twitter. He says, the last time I voted, I had to ask the returning officer to talk me through the candidates and to, in fact, write in my vote. So therefore, no privacy. As a totally blind person, I can say that for some of us, the tile doesn't work due to lack of spatial awareness. I'll come back to you, Laura, in a second, because I've got some questions about the staff that actually work at polling stations. But let's speak again to Jordan Smith. Hello, Jordan.
Hi, Tony.
We mentioned your mild learning disability, Jordan. We talked about this earlier in the programme, and there was a wider issue for those perhaps with shall we say more serious concerns than you even, about understanding the whole process and what the candidates have had to say in the first place, and maybe who they're voting for, the prospective MPs or even the leaders of the party. Do you think enough is done by the main parties in the run-up to an election to help people with learning disabilities?
I don't personally think so, no, Tony. I think that a lot of the stuff that comes through the post from the main parties and the literature and the manifestos, for me, aren't in a accessible form in terms of maybe easy read, getting rid of the small print, having more pictures, and making the print larger so someone like myself with a learning difficulty can read and understand what's in front of them.
Do you think this is ignorance on their part, or simply a lack of awareness? And for all we know, representatives of the parties might be listening to this discussion and thinking, hang on, in a very mercenary way, there are some voters there to be got.
I mean, if the statistics say that not enough people with a learning difficulty are voting because of barriers that are being put in place. And I think for me, if the main parties have less than 7 weeks now to print stuff in larger print, produce easy read material, and to make things accessible for people with learning difficulties to know and understand who they're voting for, why they're voting, and to ultimately cast their mark on the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, the parties would say they've been producing simplified manifestos from the last election, but I guess the test is, are they simple enough for people with serious learning difficulties to understand? Let's bring Laura back in. Hello, Laura.
Hi.
Laura, let's talk about the staff who work at polling stations, because we heard from Stephen there that somebody said, I don't like dogs, which, is not great, is it? Who are we dealing with here? What kind of people are they? What responsibilities do they have?
The staff in the polling station often work for the local authority or are retired people who are doing it additionally, but lots of people do take a day's annual leave to work and sort of see it as a civic duty. But it does mean that they come from all walks of life, but they are all trained up, so they will all receive training in advance of polling day, and it will run through how to use a tactile voting device, customer service principles and things like that. So you should receive excellent customer service in the polling station regardless of your disability.
Yeah, anyone who's ever managed anyone will know how difficult it is to train for every scenario. Is it simply impossible to look at the wards where they're being represented and say, well, that particular problem might appear because this resident lives here and that resident... Is that impossible to do on a specific basis?
It's not impossible if we know in advance. So certainly last time I was a deputy returning officer, we had a couple that lived in one of my villages who had very poor eyesight, and one of my members of staff lived locally. And so they used to have a postal vote, and a member of the team from my office used to go out and help them complete it. And they were quite happy with that. They saw it as an independent person. So there are certainly ways that we can work around things, but it is best to speak to your local authority in advance if you have got concerns about anything.
Yeah.
Although every polling station by law is required to have a tactile voting device, a large print ballot paper. So there are things that will be there as standard.
Yeah.
Which it should be pointed out, the large print ballot paper you're not allowed to actually use.
No, you still have to be able to complete an ordinary size ballot paper. It's just to help people with visual impairment. They can take it in the booth to read the text in a larger print, but by law they're not allowed to complete it.
Yeah. Just a final word about the staff, Laura, because I'm also keen not to just focus on the staff. It's not all their fault, is it, by any means, and they're all volunteers. But is there any way of assessing them, or do you just react if there's a complaint about a particular incident?
No, there is continued assessment of them. So each polling station will have a polling station inspector, and they will visit the polling stations throughout the day. And also anecdotally, you'll get information from a poll clerk reporting to you on a presiding officer to give you an idea whether there are any issues. And certainly a lot of my colleagues will be sending out surveys afterwards to ask about people's experience in the polling station on polling day.
Yeah, there's an interesting stat here from Mencap that says that if you look at the general public who say they're not very interested in politics, it's 55%, but actually 70% of people with a learning disability said that they wanted to vote in the future. I mean, Jordan, would you say that you are particularly interested in politics?
I personally am. As I say, my first voting was in 2005, and I'm looking to vote in 7 weeks' time. And I think that the fact that 70% want to vote, and all of those 70% should be able to vote, and it shows that there's a real keen interest for people with a learning difficulty to vote.
Yeah. Stephen, I wonder about the process of actually registering to vote. I mean, we've talked about going to the polling station and putting your cross in the box, but what about registering to vote in the first place? How did that work for you?
Well, I was very lucky. I'm 26 now. When I turned 18 in 2008, you automatically got put on the electoral roll based on what you put on the census. But for people who are registering to vote now, they have to go on to Her Majesty's Government website and sign up through the website. It just so happens that I've done a bit of research and I found out that website is not accessible.
Right. So if you have problems in the first place, then the website doesn't solve those problems for you.
Basically, if a visually impaired person, or if somebody who is blind or partially sighted now is not registered to vote already, they will not be able to do so on their own using a speech synthesizer.
Yeah.
Anna, one thing I would just say there, though, is you can register to vote over the telephone. So the government does have its website, but if you phone your local council and you need to register, it is possible to register to vote over the telephone or in person, or still using a paper form. So whilst there is the website, there are other registration methods.
But I don't think we should be playing potluck with access. That's the point.
That's very true. I mean, for the people who'll be listening to this conversation who suddenly, who might not be registered, it's good to know that you can. But as Stephen was saying there, Hugh, these are, who have you been, pushing on these issues? I mean, is it the Electoral Commission, as we heard from? Is it the political parties, or is it the government? Who have you been lobbying?
Well, everybody. We've been talking to the Cabinet Office for years, and they have adopted a very positive response over the last few years. The Electoral Commission have got excellent guidance in place. They've updated it very recently. They've taken on the RNIB and Mencap advice. This stuff takes some time to come through the system, and many of us who are voters with disabilities feel very frustrated it's taken so long. But I think that there are positive things happening, and we really want to thank the Electoral Commission for making the steps they've made recently. But picking up on the point about the online registration process, I tested it myself a while ago and registered, and found with my screen reader I could use it. So I think if people do struggle with accessibility of that site, they should certainly let their electoral services know.
Yeah.
And I think the issue with some other points about people doing postal votes, our research shows that the vast majority of blind and partially sighted people want to get out and vote. They don't want to be trapped at home. And I think this is a really important point about society is those of us who are disabled. We need to be in the polling stations, not at home, because that's more convenient for the local authority.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but Stephen, I know you've looked into the way things are done in America in particular, where they have computers at polling stations that solve some of those issues.
Yes, the way they do it is that there are two laws that govern their provision, the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Help America to Vote Act. And what they both cover is they state that all polling stations must have a computer whereby which is set up with all the access technology included, which will mark the person's ballot paper for them using a keypad. So to use an example of how it would work, for Barack Obama, press 1. For Mitt Romney, press 2. Now, that's a system I'd love to have over here, not least because we could guarantee not just that we would start to see more of a country that works for everyone, but also have a better guarantee, a guarantee that I will have a vote independently and in secret.
Yeah, we've just got a few seconds left. I wanted to finish with you, Laura, because there might be people listening to this who are, maybe put off by the difficulties that they might face in voting. But obviously, doing the job that you do, democracy is important to you. You want people to get out there and vote.
Exactly. We want everyone who wants to vote to be able to vote, and in the most convenient way possible for them. So if you've got any concerns in advance, speak to your local council now. Discuss with them where your polling station is and how you can vote on polling day.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks all, Jordan, Hugh, Laura and Stephen. Thank you. Thanks for your text as well, as always.